Okay, so when we're talking about progressive enhancement with Remix, there's a lot of different things we can do, and we have some tools that will really help us out. But something we were talking about before this meetup started, just informally, was the idea of Remix stacks. So let's go ahead and look at those. Raise of hands, or show of hands, sorry, who is familiar with Remix stacks? Can't speak.
Now I am.
Well, now you are, okay. Okay, I guess this might be easier. Raise hands. Who's never heard of Remix stacks or not super familiar? Sweet, okay, cool. About 50-50, we'll call it that. So Remix stacks is something that was kind of pioneered or started by the Remix team. They stole it from, I believe, the Ruby on Rails world kind of had this idea at first. And it's really just opinionated stacks of databases, authentication, all sorts of different things, even down to like how your specific style of flavor of styling. That's the word I'm trying to use. So it's just like an opinionated, hey, here's all these different pieces to build a stack and how they would all integrate into Remix, Remix being the common piece around these. The Remix team created 3 different stacks, the Blue stack, the Indie stack, and the Grunge stack. That is not all the stacks that exist. And fortunately, we're not beholden to the Remix team to give us more stacks before we can do things. They've created a way to let you create your own kind of template and different stacks. I was showing, remind me your name one more time. Tom? Tom. Oh, I got it, good. Okay, so I was showing Tom earlier that these are like if you just tag a GitHub repo with a certain something, I don't remember what it is, it's like a tag. Yeah, Remix stack. You can see all sorts of custom made ones. The K-pop one, I think, is made by Netlify. Remix starter serverless, I have no idea what that is, but it looks like AWS. So there's all sorts of ones in the wild. They're pretty cool. The one I like the most is the Indie stack because I do listen to a good bit of indie rock myself. But also I just like the stack for getting up and running. It's pretty easy to go. So when we're talking about progressive enhancement, what better way to start than with a starter? So I'm going to go into my terminal, go into desktop, and I'm just going to blindly run whatever they told me to run and hope that it all works out. We'll see. Also, I'm sorry, that's a little bit small. I will bump it up in 1 second. Oh, good. Did you find it? Yay. We're starting a stack, okay? Of course, this is going to run npm install, and so that's we all know that does take a little bit. It's going to be the slowest part of the evening, probably getting everything to run. Just a quick rundown of what this stack includes, and we're not even going to touch all this stuff, but just in case you're curious, Fly app deployment, which is a edge computing kind of startup. I think they're still in that startup phase. They're pretty cool. SQLite database. That's an easy way to get up and going that we don't really need to install anything special. SQLite is nice for just playing around with a simple database. GitHub Actions, cookie-based sessions, Prisma, which is an ORM, Tailwind, which is how you can style things, Cypress, all sorts of fun stuff. Let's hope that that's worked. Oh, we're about halfway done.
What is NPX as opposed to NPM?
That's a good question. So NPX is basically a way to run, you can run a lot of things on it, but like typically it's like binaries and things. So without actually having to install the NPM package globally, it's just a way to say, point me to that CLI that's on NPM and just run it just like once. You don't need to put it in my global
So
like NPM module and everything.
Temp area, and then it'll go away when you reboot.
Yeah, and if you do have it installed globally, I think it might be smart enough just to go ahead and use that. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, it basically just optimizes it so that you're not like cluttering up your global NPM with like a bunch of different packages. Yeah,
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. It's a good question, and don't take my word for that because that is just my remembrance of it. Last time I looked it up, so it's been a second. It's just one of those things that it used to be NPM install global, and then it stopped being that, and we all use NPX. Exactly. Yeah, that's the global. Yeah, -G. Yeah, exactly. Okay, we are going to use TypeScript. We're not even really going to use TypeScript, so don't worry about it. Should have run this before. I always.
So Remix supports TypeScript?
Yeah. Remix or JavaScript. It's really your choice. They've got both out the bag for you, and TypeScript's highly configurable too. So if you don't like how they set it up, you can always change things, which is nice. Okay, my Remix app. So that's where we're in. So I'm going to open this up. Let's do a quick check just to make sure my editor is nice and big. We're looking good. Everyone can read that. If I go into the README, is that good enough? All right, we're going to say it is. So I'm going to run npm run dev. This is all you need to do to get this stack up and running. Last time I checked, hopefully that's all it is. 3001, that should be good. I think I have something else running. Okay, so cool. We're on 3001. This is This is like a little blog site I think that they made. It's just a demo. Let me see if I can remember this. Remix.run. This is not my account. This is just like the base account they give you.
Yeah, that's on the README.
Yeah, and of course I don't actually know what it is. I think it's Rachel@remix.com, and then it should be Rachel is cool. Yeah, okay, cool. We got it. All right. So we got all these different things. So we got my second note, my first note, new note, you can create things, yada, yada, yada. Not gonna go into too much of the details of how everything works, but one thing we do want to show is these different pages. So if you're unfamiliar, no, that doesn't bump up what I wanted to. If you're unfamiliar with Remix, if this is your first time, one thing that Remix is really big on is it's big on the URL. So it has file-based routing, right? If you're not familiar with what that means, the easiest way to take it apart is let's just look at what we have here. We have localhost 3001, that's just the host, that's not important. Then we have notes, so remember that. And then we have CL3XOFV8, okay, don't have to remember that part, but we have something after notes. Okay, so when we go into our code base, let me close this. And let me open the app. And inside of routes, we can see notes. So that correlates to this half. And then inside of notes, we have a $ note ID, and that correlates to this part. So this part can change. If I go between my first note and my second note, that's just like the ID, the slug. There's a million different names for whatever you want to call that. That correlates to this file. So Remix, if you're unfamiliar, is, go away, Graphico, we're not even using you. Remix is file-based routing. And so, yeah, that $ note ID correlates to that.
So those IDs are not specific to a user, they're just a random ID for a particular thing that's presented to everyone.
Exactly, yeah. And in this case, like they haven't fully fleshed it out, but yes, essentially you would use that you basically would use that to look up in your database, what is the markdown for this specific note or whatever, and then render it. But exactly, you're absolutely right. Those are generic, and you can actually see the way that they use it. Not there. I think it's this. Yeah, params.noteID correlates to this $ note ID. That's actually how they're pulling it out. And then they have this get node helper that gets it. So all a bunch of useful information, but not even what I want to show. What I want to show is progressive enhancement, right? That's what I keep saying. Okay, so this is an asynchronous function, which means that it can take time essentially to run and spin off a bunch of parallel processes and all sorts of different things, or concurrent processes, not parallel, sorry. So we're going to artificially slow this down. So the way we are going to do that is we're going to do, let's see if I can remember how to do this, new promise. Oops. Set timeout. And then we'll wait like a second. Take the call back, and then we're gonna resolve it. I think that's right. No, it doesn't like that. I did. Did you forget to include void in your promise?
Might just need the curly braces.
Maybe so. You might be right. Probably doesn't like that. I'm like returning that.
Oh, it's still a yeah, you're returning set timeout.
Oh yeah, I'm not supposed to do that. I'm not sure if that's actually the problem.
Pass on the resolve.
It looks like resolve wants a value passed in.
Yeah, so in the first set of parens in the arrow function.
And this one,
Correct.
you shouldn't have to pass anything to set timeout, and I don't think you have to pass anything to resolve.
He's complaining about that though.
Expect one argument, okay?
No.
Yeah, let's try it. You might be right. Maybe it's probably, my guess, it's hypersensitive ESLint, but I could be wrong there. So anyway, all I'm trying to do here, sorry, I really should just install the package or something, is I'm just trying to make this artificially slow down. So we're gonna do 1 second, right? I'm gonna do a good refresh here. So we're on my second node. I'm gonna click my first node, and it should take a little bit to get there. It did. I'm gonna make that a little bit even more extreme. So we're gonna take 5 seconds. Let me give this a refresh just to make sure. This will actually take 5 seconds to load itself because we are loading an individual node. Okay, there, that loaded. I'm gonna hit my second node. Notice it says notice that I clicked it incorrectly. Uh-oh. Okay, well, I clicked it. I do promise I clicked it. I'm not touching anything. And there it is. Okay, we artificially slowed things down, right? Everyone can agree that this is slow. This happens in real life, right? We've all been on a website that maybe it's us, maybe it's them. especially on your phone, and things are just slow, right? Right? Not great. And the problem is we don't control how fast the end user's network is. This could be a network error on their side. It could be something slow on our side. The problem is with JavaScript, we have no way, or the way this is implemented, don't have any way to actually show them things are loading. They have no idea what's going on. They may want to spam click this at this point. Yeah, they have no idea what's going on. Why is this slow? If it even worked, did their click register? We have no idea. So I went back down to a second. Let's disable JavaScript and see what happens if we don't even have JavaScript. What is the experience that we have? So I click my second note. The thing that you'll see, if you actually focus right here and right here, you'll see the favicon, which is that R, starts to spin. So by default, if you don't have JavaScript enabled, the browser already has a loading indicator built in. Certainly not the best loading indicator I've ever seen, but it is the loading indicator, right? We can actually tell when I'm going between my first note and my second note. We can see what's happening. I'm gonna go back to enabling JavaScript, and I'm gonna go to, well, give this a refresh just to make sure. Go to my second note. No pending indication, no indication whatsoever that we're changing. We have just made things worse with JavaScript, essentially. So let's never use JavaScript again, right? Just kidding. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're going to progressively enhance this, right? So how do we do that? Okay, so I'm gonna do kind of the simplest version of progressive enhancement I've ever kind of seen. I'll just show it here in the dev tools first before we get to it. Let me see if I can even remember how to do this. I think it's 0.5, yeah. So the pending indicator we're gonna do is we're just gonna do opacity. So whenever this is loading and changing, we're just gonna put an opacity on top of it, okay? Does that make sense? It's pretty simple, right? If it's loading, it'll be opaque like this. If it's not loading, it looks like this. So that's our progressive enhancement that we're gonna do with JavaScript, something fun and nice. Can't really do that in the browser without JavaScript. There's not really a way to just say if document loading, because that's literally JavaScript. And as soon as you're saying if something, you're JavaScripting. Okay, cool. So how do we do this? We've got two kind of pieces. We've got note, $note ID, right? And then we've also got notes. So let's dig in a little bit to how is Remix actually rendering this nested layout. If you notice, the actual part that changes, this is your note ID, this little square right here. This is like the sidebar that's rendered inside the notes part. So Remix has this idea not just of file-based routing, but also of nested routes. So if you're ever curious what's doing what, it's this outlet, basically. Anytime you look up an outlet, that's what's changing in Remix world. So if I comment out that outlet, we can see we no longer have that middle piece. So that middle piece, that correlates to this part of the URL, okay? We're all good, this all makes sense. Sorry if I'm going a little fast, and I'm jumping over like 10 different Remix things at once. Okay, so let's make sure that this actually works. So we're gonna do opacity 50, oh my gosh, opacity 50, perfect. And we wanna see, okay, cool. So we got some opacity. So that's what we want to do. We want to add opacity there. And by the way, if you're wondering, how did I just do opacity -50? That's Tailwind. It's a styling library. Don't worry about it. I could have done this as CSS. There's a million ways to do it. That's just a detail. Okay, so how do we get that to dynamically load if JavaScript is enabled and if I'm transitioning between routes? That's the question. So there's this really cool and confusingly named API. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna come up here, transition. It's always a lot harder to type when people are looking at you. And we're gonna use transition. I'm gonna spell it all out so we can see something. Oh, wow, that's actually very surprising.
Also the name of the new React thing.
Yeah, you're getting ahead of me. Okay, so I'm not on, what's the latest React? Does anybody know?
18.
Is it not 0.1? 0.0, 0.1? Oh my gosh, gotta look it up.
Drop
Gotta be on the latest.
an asterisk.
It's 1.0. Yeah, you're
A
right.
range modifier.
I know, but I don't want to remember how to do that. Okay, so, sorry, everybody, you gotta stop the dev server. We gotta rerun everything. Not everything, nope. I'm gonna install again. So sorry if I went a little fast there for anybody. We're just upgrading to the latest version of React. This actually is gonna break, so I'll revert it in a second. We're not gonna worry too much about it. So as Tom was pointing out, if I do use transition now, why did it not show up? Oh well, it's not worth it. Basically, all that happens is use transition is actually a React hook as well. which is very, very unfortunate. So now Remix has used transition.
Just need to alias it, right?
That's one idea. And then also React has used transition. And they do pretty different things. This is still saying it's experimental. That's actually completely wrong. I don't know why it's saying that. Here we go. So these are different. This returns a tuple, and the Remix one doesn't. Oh my gosh, it's so hard to find things. It doesn't. It returns like an object with state type submission. So unfortunate, but that's the way it is. Anyway, big rabbit hole here. Use transition is actually going to be called use navigate by the Remix people in a later version at some point. That's the moral of the story there. But we could call it whatever we want. You're absolutely right.
But use navigate,
Yeah, because, and I'll show you why in a second.
isn't that for React router though?
Yeah, exactly. So in React Router, they're changing it to use navigate, and then when that's stable, they'll get back into Remix, and then they'll recall that, but they'll have both versions at the same time. So that they don't break anything, but you can incrementally adopt it.
Lots of stories like that in the world of JavaScript.
Exactly. Anyway, so we got transition. Hopefully I didn't break everything severely. Also, I don't bore anybody else out. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so we have transition. We're just gonna console log this because that's the easiest way to figure out what things do, at least for me. I don't need that, I don't need that. All right, hopefully this is actually working again. Cool, so we can all see what a console log is this big object. So it's got a location, which is undefined. It's got state idle, submission undefined, type idle. Again, use transition, it's coming from Remix. So what happens when I go to a different page or I navigate away? Hence use navigate. Okay, I get a couple different things. I get a new state called idle, another state which is loading, and another state which is idle. So what's going on? So if I get into transition, let's pull off that state because that seemed useful. So if we look at the state actually in TypeScript, this is why I love TypeScript because it tells you things. It has 3 different states that it can be in: idle, submitting, and loading. Anyone want to take a guess as to what these 3 states mean? No guesses? I'll give you idle. Idle means nothing's happening.
It was like the user just submitted a change and then it is pending, and then loading is like the get, the initial get.
Exactly, yeah. So there's this idea of loaders and actions and Remix. We're not going to go too much into that, but think of it as your actions, like the user changed something or submitted a form. So submitting, if someone changed something, loading is we're just getting a new page, or maybe the updated results of a page, and maybe that.
How would submitting and loading be significant, like from submitting to
Submitting, yeah, I don't know. It would be like if your database is offline, I don't know, or like really slow for some reason, like you're trying to, like, okay, sorry. An example of submitting is I want to delete this. That would be a submit action. And maybe it takes a long time because someone forgot to index the database. I don't know, something like that. Who knows? It might not.
But when is the point to differentiate it?
The
I
point-
mean,
Oh, yeah. Well, the point is.
processing is processing, right?
Mhm. So let's take the example of, say I want to delete this and I want to show a pending indicator on the deletion piece, then I would want to check the submitting state versus I'm just transitioning to a new page, then I might want a different pending UI.
Mhm.
So it's just based on what your UI is. And you may want to do the exact same pending UI to both, in which case just say if not idle, which is what I'm actually going to do here because this is great questions. Okay, cool. So let's see if it's really that easy. I gotta refactor this a little bit. I should know about that. We're gonna say if transition dot state is is it loading?
Loading.
I already forgot. Thank you so much. Oops. So if it's loading, I'm just gonna copy and paste it. There's better ways to do this. I hope you all know that. Opacity 50. We're being very undry here. Okay, if it's loading, it's flex 1, P6, opacity 50. That was the important part, right? Okay. Everything looks good, right? Let me also get, well, I'll leave that console, it doesn't matter. Click here, you see the opacity, and it went back. Click here, see the opacity, and then it goes back. So this is the way that we can use transition to do progressive enhancement. There's a lot more you could do here. You can pass in like the state. So since we know that the second node is going to be called my second node, actually, let's do that really fast because I think that'll be pretty easy to show. So this is the nav link that we're using to get between notes, right? So with any nav link, you can pass something called state, and this can just arbitrarily be whatever you want it to be called. So let's just pass along note. Note is the current note that we have. Since I'm already console logging this state, we'll just keep doing that and see what happens. So if I go to this one, when we're in the loading state, we can see we're passing an item of what the node object is that we have. So if I go into location dot slash state slash note, we can see the ID and the title.
So is that location like the same as like the use location from?
Yeah, it's
React
all React Router.
Okay.
Yeah, so Remix is the dirty secret of Remix is just React Router, but with more configuration for your server side stuff.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. So yeah, you got it. If you know React Router, you know like 80% of Remix, I would say, and the good parts really. So we can take that. We're not gonna appease TypeScript in this. So it's what location.state.node. Oh my goodness. Okay, transition. Oops. Dot location. Oh, thank you so much. This is why you code in front of people. Dot state, and then this is where they're gonna get mad at me. Dot node, dot title. Okay, so what we're gonna say is, where is it that I'm looking for? Sorry, I'm looking for where it says like my second node. So let's see, it's probably this H, no, that's nodes. There's the user email, there's the form. Oh, it's gonna be in the outlet, of course. Okay, let me think how I wanna do this. So in node ID, what we render is we render this div and this H3 that says it. So basically, we're gonna replace this. Yeah, we're basically gonna have like more or less like a skeleton UI, but it's a little bit different than that. So I'm gonna get these side by side. Hopefully this will make sense in a second.
Remind me, is outlet like children, basically?
Yeah.
Okay.
More or less, yeah, it's the child of your URL, more or less, but yeah.
I got you.
So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna say if transition dot, oh my gosh, I don't know why it keeps doing that to me. There's some plugin or something.
Turn off Copilot.
Ooh, that's actually a good point. I really should. Slash loading. Okay, so if it's loading, I'm gonna render something else, and then if it's not, I'm gonna render outlet. You leaving us, Grant?
Yeah, I gotta take off, but thank you, it's interesting.
Of course, yeah. Hope to see you around. Have a good evening.
Yeah, I'll check that.
Okay, so
What are you doing?
yes, I'm getting a little ahead, sorry. So what I'm doing here is basically I'm gonna say, if we're in the loading state, I'm gonna render something else. Otherwise, I'm gonna render the outlet. So right now, as it is, what we're gonna see is if I go in between, it just completely disappears. That's pretty bad, right? That's not a great user experience. But since we captured the state of the, like that's in the sidebar, we can actually render like more or less a skeleton UI of this. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna render a div for now, and we're gonna render an H3. And again, you should dry this up, but I'm not going to. I'm actually gonna just copy this. So when we're in the loading state, I'm gonna load this, but instead of this data.node.title, I'm gonna pull out what we just had up above. It was that thing that I was pulling out and I never.
Transition location state.
Yeah, where did that go? Did I throw it away? Ah,
Yeah.
probably did. Okay, thank you. I'm glad I have you guys to find out I'm making mistakes. Dot location, dot state, dot node, dot, was it title? We can check here. No, we can't. Probably is that. We'll see. Again, TypeScript's unhappy here. You really should be checking if this exists, all that kind of stuff, but we're gonna ignore TypeScript for now. And let's-
Put question mark.
that will kind of work. I think it's this one. You might be right, actually.
You could do like.
It's because,
Yeah,
yeah, it's because it's unknown. Their types are bad. And it's honestly, it's on them. And they've like admitted this is like not their best one. Basically, what we really need to do is we need to check, does this actually exist before rendering it? Which actually you really should be doing because we don't have to render if it exists, but I just. I'm not gonna
You wrap transition dot location with paren and as any. That would kind of get you.
Sure, yeah, I mean, that's another way to cheat, just to get rid of like this. I don't do this in the wild, like seriously, please don't do that. Like, why are you even using TypeScript at that
Yeah.
point? But I agree, you're right, like, yeah, we got rid of it. But we really should be checking this because that state may not exist. The transition may be from something else. Remember, we are only getting this state if we are clicking this button, this nav link, not button, sorry. That was a football. Okay, cool. So what actually just happened? Why did we do all that? Because if I click this, we see my second node, it's loading in, and then there it is in all its glory. We got all the data. Because when we do the transition, when we click this or this navigation, we don't actually have all the data, and we don't want to wait to show this pending ID until we have all the data. So let's just use what we have and show it a little bit better. We could also show that delete button and probably make it opaque or something or disabled. There's a lot more we could do, but the point is just this is how progressive enhancement works. Since we talked about progressive enhancement, I should actually show this all works, right? So let's just say with JavaScript, we'll give this a refresh. And transitioning between, of course, we don't see anything because JavaScript isn't there to do all that. We can't change out styles. We can't do all that dynamic stuff without JavaScript, but we get that nice fallback of the favicon does spin, which is good. And we actually do see the little refresh button turn to an X. So the user still knows, hopefully, that something's happening, but that's about the best we can do without JavaScript. We don't really have control. So we're just falling back on what the browser does by default. But with JavaScript, again, we can progressively enhance things and make it all look a little bit better. Arguably, this is actually better, but the pinning UI could be better than this version, but it is. At least I know stuff is happening, even if this is slow, and that's kind of what you want to do with progressive enhancement.
But you could also take a step further into optimistic updates, in
Absolutely.
which the user experience is even better,
Yeah,
or at least it appears even better.
right. Like we could do something like this. Like if we wanted to get crazy, let me just pull this out. I'll do this.
Not to derail it.
No, this is great. I love it.
That's I feel like that's the next step if it's graceful degradation versus progressive enhancement
Exactly,
versus
yeah.
optimistic updates.
Yep. No, so let's do this. Okay, so we don't have the body right.
And nav link has preloading functionality in it.
Yes, exactly. And we could do that. That's absolutely true. But if you're, oh, sorry. So like we can, that's a great point. Okay, so no. Let me think how to show that really fast. Okay, let me do that. Let me comment all this out and show exactly what you're saying, because it's such a cool thing. I love it. So on this nav link right now, I'll get back to Lorem in a second. Let's go to network. I'll try and wrap up in about 10 minutes, just so if people need to leave or we can chat and whatnot. So right now, if I hover over this, nothing on the right hand is changing, right? But if I do exactly what Veronica, okay, what
You
Veronica
can.
said is we can add this prefetch prop to a nav link, and we can give it intent, none, or render. I'm not gonna go, well, I guess I can go over these. I'll go over intent. So intent, what intent means is
When you hover,
when you hover or focus on the nav link, that's the intention. You're automatically going to load in the next page. So does this work? You tell me. Wait, did it work? I don't know. Hold on. So we go hover over my first node. Not sure what's going on here, actually. Yeah, it's not prefetching it. I don't know what I did wrong there. That's very bizarre. Doing a refresh. Do you see? Yeah,
intent should be found.
yeah. Let's just do render and see if it automatically loads. Man, I literally showed this last time. Okay, there. No, it's still not working. All right, we're gonna turn off dev. Sorry about that, guys.
But you still won't get like the loading state, right?
Yeah, so basically the idea of what this does is, there it goes. Okay, so let me go to this. Okay, so I'm gonna refresh, sorry. I'm gonna clear everything, and when I hover over my first node, it automatically is loading something. Now, when I click my first node, we actually do have the pending, which is still weird to me.
Yeah.
It must refresh it again. I'm not sure what's going on, but basically the idea what Veronica's trying to say is it goes ahead and it loads all the data for you ahead of time so that it should feel very snappy. I think what's going on is I have disabled cache on.
If you turn off JavaScript, you still don't get the loading state though, but it does do the prefetching because that's part of the browser.
That's a good question. No, because with, it kind of depends. So,
Let's try it.
yeah, we tried. That's a good point. So sorry, I did want to show that this is working. It was my fault. I had disable cache on, so I'm gonna hover over and I'm gonna click this, and now we see an immediate update. It was a little bit flashy. That's probably something either I did wrong or just because we're in dev mode. All right, so disable JavaScript. Oops. Yeah, I know, really. Okay, so if I do, let's see, if I hover over it, so I don't know if prefetch intent is actually built into the browser, at least maybe it's not fully supported, because it is not currently working. As you can see, this is a slow load.
Maybe
I think it works with images, but this is like doing full pages, and I think that's the difference, if I remember right.
Okay.
And maybe it's using some JavaScript in it.
I think it, I mean, I know, yeah, Remix, the way they're doing it, they are using JavaScript. I'm not sure if it's because the browser doesn't support everything they want to do, and so they're doing it themselves. Or if it's something like only for images or something, and so that's why they're doing it. So yes, that is a JavaScript enhancement.
So was that prefetch attribute part of like the link tag,
Not
H-
link.
HTML level?
Yeah, let's look at it.
Does link have? Oh, HTML level?
I think I saw it on MDN, like that's like a bold feature.
Okay, so we got rel prefetch. So what is prefetch actually doing? So the prefetch value of a rel attribute specifies that the target source should be preemptively cached. So yeah, they are doing that. I'm not 100. I'd have to. That's a really good question. I'd have to look into what the browser does versus what like Remix actually does. Because I think they're going a little bit beyond even what the browser does. But you're right. This is a tag and this is a feature, but it's a little outside of what I'm with right
I
now.
bet like it only pulls the props you need to get to that page for the client side navigation.
Yeah,
And then the browser version would do like a whole page reload. So.
that's probably also
download all the
true.
assets first.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The other thing is, can I use, says every browser, but desktop Safari supports prefetch.
Oh, gosh. I think that might be also part of the reason that, yeah, thank you.
It's interesting to like what extent they went with like, are we falling back to like just baseline browser stuff and like where did we actually go further?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let's get into that after this, because that's like very philosophical, and you're totally right. Like that's a big part of what Remix is doing is,
That's a really good reason to choose it for any framework.
yeah,
How is it web standards?
Yeah.
because basically they're trying to say, what does the browser do? Let's not break that first of all, and then secondarily, how can we make that even better? How can we like build on what they're already trying to do? So prefetch is a browser thing. You're right, and they're trying to say, how can we make that better for everybody, essentially. That's a great point. Yeah, Safari, I think that would be my guess as to if maybe they are eventually gonna lean on it and they're just waiting until Safari gets there. Because they don't want people to assume this is gonna work without their implementation, and then you have the Safari app and it doesn't work. I don't know though. Okay, sorry, last thing I want to show is another way we can kind of like further enhance this is just use some more medicine. We'll throw this in here. Oops, that's not how that works. Okay, that should work. And then we're not going to use an actual form. We'll just have a button and then we'll just disable it. And then, oh gosh, sorry, Zoom is killing me right now. I can't actually see anything. Oh well. Can I have to log in again? No, cool. Cool, so now we can see some more and then it loads. So we can give it a little bit of a nicer, UI. Let me disable the cache again so we can keep seeing it. There you go. We can have a little, that's a little bit better pending, UI argument than what I originally
Would
had.
the optimistic way be like a skeleton where that?
That's another option. Yeah, it kind of, this gets really into design, user experience research, stuff that like is not my.
Is that what optimistic is?
Exactly. It's a
Like where it's like,
skeleton.
oh,
Yeah.
we know the title, we don't know the body quite yet, and so we put a
Yeah.
skeleton and then.
In general, if you can expect a successful
Okay.
response, you behave as if it already occurred.
Yeah.
And then only show an error state if maybe a few seconds later, the network call failed
Yeah.
or something.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's why it feels snappier. Typically, you have like a local variable, a local cache, like if you're using Apollo client for GraphQL or
Yeah.
Yeah.
Redux or a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you could, using prefetch, you could get this ahead of time. If my cache weren't disabled, which is gonna be most users, it's just the first time you see it that it's gonna do that. This all depends like a lot on your app, but that's why the primitive they give you is like, I mean, going back to what we just did, this is the primitive they give you. It's one thing, just one little thing, because they don't know what you wanna do. They don't know if you wanna use a skeleton UI or if you already have half the data already existing, or you just wanna do the opaque thing like I did. So they're just like, hey, here it is. You do with it what you have the data to support. more or less.
Would you really weight more towards these sort of caching solutions like GQL or Apollo or whatever, if you want to implement optimistic UI?
Yeah, so it depends. It really depends on your application.
Sometimes
So
you want to bust the cache.
yeah, well, that's part of it. Also, like, remember, GraphQL is like, its cache is a JavaScript cache. So it's not gonna work without JavaScript, which we're already in the world where like we are using JavaScript. So it might not be a big deal. However, like what Remix is really trying to lean on is the fact that you can actually cache these pages. So again, if I disable this cache and I go between these two, okay, the first time it didn't really show, but now it's gonna be, it's still not working. I'm probably doing something wrong. It should be cached at this point. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Oh, it's still because it's loading. Never mind. Ignore that. But basically, yeah, they want you to kind of lean on like the browser and the cache that the browser has built in, which I'm not doing a good job leaning on because I think I am actually essentially busting that cache myself because the loader is messed up. So GraphQL, certainly a great solution, but you have to have a really heavy client cache, and that can be part of the problem, which can totally work. That's what we do at HTTP.com. We actually preload a bunch of stuff for you whenever you hit any page the first time. We pre-warm the entire cache, and then we send it along down into the remix, or not the remix, sorry, the React like markup, and then we hydrate it all once JavaScript loads.
And by the way, cache is always tiered. So you may have a browser cache, and then your framework or application may have its own cache, and then your GraphQL client might have its own cache, and then your API client may have its own cache, and then your BP has its own indexes, and like, so there's a whole bunch of different layers of caching that can exist.
Okay, cool. So I didn't even show what I was originally thinking I was going to show, which is great because now it's off for another time. But I hope this was interesting and good conversation for everybody about what premature, that's not what it's called, progressive enhancement looks like. But yeah, with that, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording. People online, you're welcome to stick around or head out or whatever you want to do. I'm also gonna stop sharing.